Everyone, thanks for coming back to the My Tech Decisions podcast. On this episode, we go over the 71 security vulnerabilities that Microsoft patched this month with Dustin Childs, the Senior Communications Manager with Zero Day Initiative. There are several notable bugs in Exchange Server, RDP, SMB, and Azure Site Recovery that admins should prioritize. Before we get to the interview, here's a quick reminder to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and Google to hear weekly interviews with IT experts that can help you make the right decisions for your organization. And now, here's Dustin. All right, so Dustin, let's go with just your overall thoughts here. Anything that you found interesting this month? I know you noted that there were only 3 critical rated bugs on patch,
right.
And you write that it's lower than normal. Just elaborate if you can.
Yeah, normally when you see 71 CVEs addressed, which is how many Microsoft addressed this month, you'll have a higher percentage of those be critical. This month, there's only 3 critical rated CVEs and 68 important. So that was a little unusual to me. I would expect there to be closer to 10 just based on the average ratio that we've seen in the past. So that's an interesting thing, whether it's coincidence or whether Microsoft has changed somehow the calculus on how they estimate severity. It's just something to keep note of. And it's also just a reminder that severity a lot of times is based on individual characteristics. So enterprises should really look at things and say like, well, this is critical to me. Or maybe converse is like, well, this is critical, but I don't have this component in my enterprise, so it's not critical to me.
Right. So there was another remote code execution bug in Exchange Server. It seems like there's one of these almost every month. You write that this particular one, you wouldn't be surprised to see it exploded in the wild soon. Why is that? What makes this one particularly dangerous?
Well, in this case, it does require authentication, but that authentication is just like you have a mailbox on an Exchange server. And this type of bug is the type of bug that we see attackers really look for when they're looking to do lateral movement within an enterprise. So this bug is listed as exploitation more likely by Microsoft. And we see Exchange bugs exploited a lot. We know Exchange on-prem is a big target. And really starting a year ago this month, we had quite a few Exchange bugs get patched that were being actively exploited. And since that time, Exchange has remained a very attractive target for attackers because it's so complex. There's so many bugs there. And there's a wealth of opportunity, especially for lateral movement within an enterprise. And I think that's, if anything, that lateral movement is one of the themes for this month too, because we've got several bugs that would be very good for that type of exploit.
What are those other bugs that were patched this month?
Well, the first that really caught my eye is the bug in SMB v3. We've seen a lot of SMB bugs patched in the past, but that's usually version 1, which you should completely disable, or version 2, not as many that are impacting v3. And this is hitting both client and server. So again, authentication is required here, but if you're within an enterprise, you're already authenticated, assuming that you have any sort of creds, and then you would be able to move laterally within that enterprise through this type of bug. There are some workarounds that are listed by Microsoft, which people should consider. But those workarounds aren't really documented well as far as what negative impact it might have, if any, on an enterprise. So definitely test those before you push those out.
Let's talk about Azure Site Recovery. There were quite a few both elevation of privilege and remote code execution bugs in this tool. Should these be treated with any heightened importance for companies that rely on this feature?
I certainly would, especially with everything going on in the world right now. Disaster recovery should be on the top of mind for a lot of network defenders. So anytime you come up with 11 bugs all at once in your disaster recovery system, which is what Azure Site Recovery is used for, is disaster recovery as a service, you should definitely take that into account and go, hey, this is something I really need to pay attention to, because should something happen to my enterprise, the tools I rely on to respond and recover from that might be compromised. So the old saying is, I guarantee 100% backups. I don't guarantee 100% recovery. So definitely check that out. And if you use Azure Site Recovery, definitely test and deploy these quickly. And if you don't use Azure Site Recovery, now's a great time to review your disaster recovery plans regardless, and make sure that you're good to go.
Yeah. What other patches are you prioritizing if you're an IT admin?
So the only other patch that I really look at as being really critical here is the one for remote desktop clients. Now, this is not as severe as the bugs for RDP server like Bluekeep, which we saw a couple of years ago. In this case, you'd have to entice someone to connect to a malicious RDP server. However, we've heard that there is already proof of concept code for this bug circulating publicly. Microsoft does list this as publicly known.
Right.
So because of the public aspect of that, and the fact that we know RDP is often targeted, this is another one that I would prioritize. Again, authentication is required, so that's a thing. But again, lateral movement within an enterprise, this would be a great bug to have somebody RDP to what they think is a known server, or an attacker could man in the middle and redirect them to their RDP server and then take over their system. Especially since we know that there's active proof of concept code available.
Right.
It would not surprise me to see this roll into active attacks before too long.
Can you talk about the critical rated video extension RCs? There wasn't a whole lot of information about those. I'm wondering if you can just elaborate on the severity of those.
Yeah, the severity of these is pretty simple. It's when you're viewing specific, specially crafted videos that rely on those video extensions to render them. You could potentially have code execution occur at the level of the logged on user, usually. So what this means is somebody is going to send you a video, or you click on a specific file and it opens on your system, and then code execution, the attacker's code, will occur. The question here, especially with the critical ones, is can that file be hosted on a remote server or a website? And it's really not clear from Microsoft's description if it can. But I would go ahead and treat it like you could browse to a website and then have code execution occur onto your system, because we've seen bugs like that, the browsenome, the watering hole attacks, where if you go to a specific website, you're going to get owned. And usually what happens is attackers will try to socially engineer you somehow to go to this website, either getting you to click a link, or in some cases, we've seen ad services be compromised or at least exploited to have content put in them that would act in this manner. So if you're using these extensions, definitely update them, and they're updated through the Microsoft Store. So make sure that you're connected to the Microsoft Store so that you can get the updates. And if not, you're definitely going to have to push those out manually.
Right. And you also note the vulnerability in Xbox. I know a lot of enterprises probably aren't relying on Xbox too much.
Sure.
Under what circumstance would an organization be using Xbox in their environment?
So there are a lot of organizations that do have, I don't know if you would call them break rooms or morale rooms, where they do have Xboxes and other entertainment systems set up. A lot of times these systems are not cordoned off or isolated from the rest of their network environments. So you really could have an Xbox connected to your enterprise and not even really understand that it's connected. And it's possible that you could pivot off of an Xbox to somewhere else. The other thing that's interesting to note about this is the update is available for all versions of Windows, but Microsoft is very specific when they say only Xbox is affected. What that really means is we only know of a way to get to this bug on Xbox, but that code exists on all the other versions of Windows. So that's another area where you need to be careful. It's like, well, on my Windows systems, I don't know how an attacker could reach this, but it's there. So if an attacker could figure out how to reach it, then you go from an Xbox bug to a Windows bug.
Right. Great. Very good, Dustin. Anything else that you think admins should note about this month's Patch Tuesday?
The only other thing that I would note about this Patch Tuesday is just the amount of bugs that we see that are patched through the Microsoft Store itself. So I think enterprises should really be careful to ensure that they are getting all of the patches out that they think that they are getting. It's not just going to be rolling out one cumulative update. It's going to be a little bit more work this month to make sure everything's patched. So definitely take your time and review those bugs to see which ones are serviced through the Microsoft Store and to make sure that your systems are getting updated appropriately.
Very good. All right, Dustin, thanks again for stopping by. I appreciate it.
No problem, Zach. Thanks for having me and hope to see you next month.
No problem. Take it easy.